everybody, and welcome to the Goot Reaction. I'm Joe Goot, your host, and with me is Triple M, a main man from the Midwest. And it is Wednesday, November 6th, so just one day after the election. And we just wanted to do a quick follow-up. We did a pre-election episode where we analyzed some of the numbers, went through some trends, talked about our feelings on the topic a little bit, and didn't make any predictions, of course, because while I made a little prediction on the side, it totally got blown out of the water, but I didn't publish that because of how just unpredictable everything looked. I still wanted to take a shot, but anyway, we just wanted to hop on here real quick and just share some thoughts, kind of do a little bit of an election debrief, I guess, and just kind of figure it out real time. I know we're not going to come to any specific conclusions because I think there's a lot of pundits out there that are saying, oh, it had to be this or it had to be that, or if only they did this differently, and nobody knows for sure. So definitely coming at this with some humility, just some introspection, and just kind of a quick follow-up on, what we saw yesterday and today. So like I said, definitely with a strong dose of humility and understanding that things didn't go the way I wanted them to go. I really was hoping for a different outcome here, and there'll be time for, more conversations on this subject, but we're probably going to leave the subject of politics for a while just to explore other topics and give it room to breathe and that kind of thing. And there'll be, if you want to hear political analysis for the next few weeks, whatever, there are definitely places you can turn to for that. So it's just, I think we're gonna do this one episode, this post-election show, and then hop onto some other topics for a while. With that being said, I guess I'll just start off here and say, I mean, this was a big surprise, honestly. I think from both sides, honestly. And the biggest thing I think that shocked me was the fact that as of the last time I looked, Kamala was sitting around 67 million votes, give or take, in the national popular vote. Trump got basically what he did in 2020. And so really no major movement there. So he pulled in his basically the same numbers as last time. But Biden got 81 million votes in 2020. And so for Kamala Harris to not get anywhere near that was just shocking to me. I mean, that's a miss of almost 14 million votes. Like, what the hell happened to those people? They didn't go to Trump because he got the same amount as he did before. They didn't go to Jill Stein. They didn't go to some other third party, really. So did 14-ish million people just stay home? I mean, what happened there? So that's my first thought and biggest surprise of the night for me. What about you?
Well, yeah, I'll comment on that first. I mean, to be honest, I hadn't seen the vote totals because, as you and I talked before we got on here, I haven't been looking at a lot or listening to a lot of stuff today. I'm letting my brain heal, I think.
Right.
On that note, I'll try my best at the humility part that you mentioned earlier. So I can tell you that where I voted yesterday morning, there was a line like I'd never seen it. The rumors were that a lot of the early voting, same thing, just people out the door, lines. I know someone who works. She always works the polls at a different area, and she said her area had 75% turnout from registered voters to.
Dang.
So when I hear that, now I don't know what the mail, MAIL, mail totals looked like. Maybe those were replaced by early in-person voting this time around. But when I hear those numbers, and then you tell me that Kamala's got 14 less million than Biden had in 20, I scratch my head a little bit on
Yeah.
that. Now I can hear a certain sector of the population go and see, we told you they cheated in 2020. You know, uh, that, but I don't. I mean, we've seen enough disproving that. We won't
Yeah.
we won't play that game. But
Well, and then
uh,
why wouldn't they have just cheated again this election to guarantee Trump wouldn't be reelected? If that was the case, if they really were rigging the election in that
true.
same way,
Yeah,
we would
yeah,
see similar numbers, if not
yeah.
more.
How did they manage to cheat in 20 when Trump was in charge of the election, and then not cheat this time around when Biden's presidency is in charge of the election? You would
Right.
think it would be easier this time. Just just
Yeah.
just saying. But man, I didn't think I was going to mention it this early in the episode, but since we already mentioned the word cheating, if we think back to that idea that everything, and I'm not saying I'm not locked into this in any way, but it's just it rolls through my brain when we say that everything that Trump does is either projection or confession, and all he talks about is other people cheating in the election. Doesn't it kind of make you wonder a little? Like, how did that guy this time around win the popular vote for the first
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
Now, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years of bullshit, and now he wins the popular vote.
hmm
I'm scratching my head a little on that one too.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, it would be easy. I've heard some people say, oh, it was definitely because Kamala was a black woman that had a big impact on the final vote. But we already had Hillary beat Trump in the popular vote. Um, we had Obama win twice. So it's not like those two factors themselves. I mean, granted, that's probably a part of it for some people. Unfortunately, that's just a fact. I would say, but an outcome determinative fact, I don't think so. Um, and interestingly, I was looking at Hillary's numbers too, and Kamala only got like less than a million more than what Hillary got in 16. So, for what that's worth, I just thought I'd note that. But yeah, I mean, to me, a lot of it comes back to, and this is where, I don't want to just do a bunch of finger pointing. It's more like the way I see it is more just taking a look at some of the choices that were made or non choices. In the case of Biden, for example, waiting till July to get out of the race. I think that was a huge mistake. And I think that was a massive uphill climb for Kamala. And if you just look in general at the way incumbents have performed around the world, let alone just in our country, incumbents are just getting the shit kicked out of them, and which is a fairly common phenomenon. So it's not so shocking, but what what I think a lot of people got maybe a little wrong in this is that Kamala was seen as essentially the incumbent, and that really hurt her. And there was, with Biden dropping out so late, there was really no full process to determine who the best candidate would be, to kind of pressure test those, the various candidates that could have come up there for the Dems. And so I think that was a huge piece of it, because if you look at the total or the percentage of people that thought the country was going in the right direction versus wrong direction, that was huge. I mean, that's directly tied to Biden. I mean, Biden's uh, approval rating is actually lower than Trump's worst approval rating right now. So, which I don't know. I think that's a little wonky, really, to say that Biden's got a lot of problems, and there's a lot of things that I would criticize him for. But the fact that he and Kamala are the incumbents, and there's just this anti-incumbent rage out there across the world. That was a huge piece of it for sure. I don't think you can overlook that in terms of being a determining factor.
So a lot of things there I want to comment on.
Yeah, I kind
Yeah,
of rambled there for a minute.
that's okay. The incumbency thing, I think you're right. Um, which I understand it more around the world in economies that haven't recovered like
Hmm.
ours have. But I feel like we should call this episode like everything is backwards too, because again, the idea that most of the economic numbers look fantastic by any measure we've ever measured the economy with, right?
Hmm.
And but yet the Biden's approval rating is super low.
Yeah.
We inflation is down. We talked about this at some point. Um, inflation is down, but prices are still up. The prices that went up from that, the worst inflationary period, are still up.
Hmm.
A lot of corporate price gouging at play there. That's just again people just documented. Um,
Yeah.
you know, but so that hurts him. But when I think about the, you hear all the time too, consumer sentiment. People are complaining about the prices of everything, but they're still spending money. They're going on
Hmm.
vacation. I mean, they're buying groceries. That's a necessity, obviously, but they're still going on vacation. They're still purchasing products. The economy hasn't suffered from what I've seen. If there's
Yeah.
numbers out
Well.
there, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of the economy is consumer spending in terms of the GDP and stuff. So that's
Yeah,
if that hasn't fallen. I mean, GDP growth has been pretty damn good. In fact, above estimates for quarter over quarter over quarter for quite a while. So if that's, and again, that's mainly consumer spending. So you would think, like, to your point, if that was taking a major hit, if people just weren't spending either because they didn't feel safe spending anything beyond what needed to survive, or because they just couldn't afford to, then GDP would be in the shitter. And that's not the case. So that's, I mean, that backs up your point directly.
yeah. So I think, I don't. Again, I might have to check the humility piece here. I'm trying, but this is something.
We'll help each other out with
Okay, but this is
that.
something that's gone through my mind recently. Not even just today, but recently. Like I think, because when you think about how many billionaires and stuff are supporting Trump too, but yet the stock market's the highest it's ever been. Billionaire wealth, you covered it one day, is up, crazy amount. And I apologize if this is a repeat of something I've said, but I think the economy, like, it really was in such a good place overall. Not to say that not that it was perfect, but it actually allowed people to sort of, oh man, this to sort of make up problems to some extent,
Mm,
right? Like
mm,
think about back during the pandemic. So let's go back to Trump's first term. The pandemic, things really like got bad. Unemployment was high. There's all those trickle down supply chain issues afterwards.
mm-hmm.
Um, things were not great for a lot of people. Those were real problems. But now it feels like it was a, man, I'm struggling to articulate here, so I apologize, but it's almost like things were so good that people could, like I said, they could almost, man, I hate to say make up problems, but you can sit there and you can buy into all this stuff and you can complain when you don't really have something you're worried about. And
Yeah,
and
I know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, where I'm going with that is like go back to 2008 election. Obama inherits the Great Recession, and he turns it all around, right? Slowly, good spending was, we talked, I think, point two. Really hope I'm not referencing a lot in the episode we haven't put out yet, but well, I might be. Apologies. But a lot of supply side spending, slower recovery, Great Recession. But Obama turns around. He turns around and he hands off this really good economy to Donald Trump the first time. And Donald Trump gets to come in and act like he's the savior of this economy, right? He's the reason. He didn't have to do anything. In fact, some of the decisions he made probably actually had a negative effect over time, and those
Hmm.
negative effects because he only gets a 4-year term because he falls on his face in the pandemic recovery. He hands a bad situation back off to Biden, who then in 4 short years turns it around. Again, not perfect, but turns it around. And there's this, you know, there's this, like I said, there's almost like you get too comfortable and you can start fantasizing about what these other these other problems are, and it's just here. Now we're gonna have to see. Now we're gonna see what Trump does, right? With
Mm-hmm.
the presidency, it looks like from last numbers I did see the Senate, maybe the
So
House too. Um,
maybe I think we have a decent shot of the Democrats taking the House, but Senate for sure is under Republican control now, or will be.
I hope any of that made sense. What I'm, I mean,
Yeah.
what I like I said, what I'm trying to say is like I almost wish like the Republicans keep causing these problems, handing it off to Dems, and then they get the benefit of the Dems to come in and solve it, and then can sit there and turn around and blame the Dems for everything. But guess what?
Mm-hmm.
If all three parts are red this time, plus a red Supreme Court, which isn't supposed to be red or blue,
Right.
you guys got no one to blame for whatever happens in these next 4 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no deep states causing this and that and the other thing. It's you guys at this point. So
Yeah.
fingers crossed.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there was a couple key things there. One thing in particular you mentioned, consumer sentiment. I think that's the biggest thing. That's so hard to. I know there is literally like a consumer confidence index, but that is just so hard to measure. But I think it's key because another thing that jumped into my head was that survey that was done. I can't remember who was the pollster that asked this question, but I think it was earlier this year. They asked good sample size of if they thought we were in a recession, and 6 out of 10 people literally thought in 2024 that we were in a recession. Where does that come
Yeah,
from?
based
And it's
on
like, hell no, we're not in a recession, but that's 60% of people roughly said that's what they thought the state of the economy was. So for all the facts about the way we normally measure an economy's strength and growth being pretty much unprecedented and the envy of the world for sure, better than all the G7 nations, um, it didn't seem to matter because, and I read this word today, vibe session. So it's almost like that's what that was. Basically, people, were just nostalgic for the low prices of the Trump administration's first couple of years, and they somehow thought he had something to do with that, and they wanted that back. And nostalgia is a very powerful feeling, along with fear and anger, which is of course two other things that they capitalize on in their rhetoric on a regular basis. So
having a short memory helps then too.
oh yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that's one of the biggest problems, right? We're actually
Hmm.
looking back on those 4 years fondly. Geez, I
Yeah.
remember uh, constant news of things like foreign governments renting hotel rooms out in Trump Hotel in Washington, with nobody, 0% occupancy. There was all sort of stories of potential corruption. Then there's the first impeachment, right before COVID. Anyway, I guess we
Hmm.
just want to, forget about all that stuff. Of course, half the people don't
Yeah.
believe it anyway, believe it to be real.
Right. One interesting thing, I was listening to the Tom Hartman show a little bit earlier, and he was talking about how, for one, this was, I think the last number that I heard that was that this election, about 16 billion was spent, which was a little bit more than the roughly 15 billion in 20. And so much of that was dark money. And a couple things that were mentioned there were that, one, the billionaires, and there's billionaires on both sides. So I'm not trying to say that money has one party or anything. But the one kind of main difference this time around was that the billionaires were out there front and center. You had Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, just openly cheerleading and supporting, campaigning with Trump and endorsing Trump. And then you had like Mark Cuban, on Kamala Harris's side, being a surrogate, going out and doing interviews and really pushing to get her elected. So this is kind of the first election where they sort of came out of the shadows and were openly advocating for their candidate of choice. So that was one thing a little different. And then the other thing was that just in general, he was talking about how there's so much more of a media ecosystem on the right than there is on the left. And just thousands of AM radio stations, multiple major news organizations, newspapers, media organizations run by conservatives. And they have just this 24/7 programming pushed out all across the country. And all you hear are all just the echoes of all the lies from Trump, all the covering up the stuff that they don't want you to hear and don't want you to see. And so that adds up too. That's just a constant drumbeat year round, day in, day out, that is just really hard to overcome. And I think that honestly plays a big role too. And that's something that no campaign is going to overcome, even if they had a full 2 years to campaign like Trump essentially did. So I thought that was another interesting point there too, that's something that's just super hard to overcome.
Yeah, and it's not only the deliberately conservative media, but it's also I can't think of the name right now, but I think it starts with an S, but there's this network of, this one, conglomerate that's basically been buying up a lot of the local, small town, local
Mm,
stations and
hmm.
basically, giving them a real conservative slant. So they're not coming out and necessarily saying, "Hey, this is conservative media,"
Right,
but it's
right.
essentially has become so. And I can tell you, you get into you get into rural America, and you don't have to spin that real hard. There's already enough feeling of typically a fairly conservative bias anyway.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so that's
Yeah.
the, and I was driving around a little bit today, just
Clearing the head.
clearing the head a little bit, and it's not the first time I've thought this, but I drive around in some rural areas, and you know the further I get, and this isn't true across the board, but I mean it feels like the further I get from diversity, and the more I get into predominantly white rural America, to where you have less and less exposure to other people and other things and other lifestyles and other cultures, and then you think about how much fear has been generated by that conservative media to those people about all those other things that they don't get to experience necessarily on a daily basis. It just gets pumped into their brains, and yet all you hear sometimes from that side is, well, nobody, you don't understand us, you don't understand, you don't care about us, rural America. And it's like, well, how much are you exposed to and or care about all these other, you know, cultures and lifestyles and races and things, like practice what you preach a little bit, get out there and, experience some things, and maybe, I don't know, it's just a very, like, the more you hear about these fears and these things is from places that aren't experiencing them.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to wonder about the legitimacy of any of it.
Hmm.
Any of what they're constantly being told to be afraid of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then you also have the manufactured neutrality out of most mainstream media. You've got just the sort of constant both sidesism and the normalization of Trump from all the quote unquote mainstream organizations out there. So that doesn't help either. So even when it's also, again, like you said, not a particularly conservative or liberal bent, but they go out of their way to normalize the insanity on that side. So that's not helping things either.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's always going out of their way, but it's the whole, Steve Bannon flood the zone with shit thing, right? There's just been so much. I mean, we touched on a few things in the
Mhm.
pre-election episode from your article, but there's just been so much stuff that you can't even like talk about it all.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? We'd do an 8 hour, 9 hour podcast if we were going to sit here and talk about all of it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then so you just, sometimes you have to narrow it down to one thing, and then that one thing can get argued, by two different sides. Let's get the 5-person panel on the whatever news talk show it is, and sit there and debate it and not come out with anything either way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
one other thing you talked about that I did want to touch on too, and I know I've mentioned this when you and I have talked um, before, and I actually went and looked up which podcast it was. So shout out to Chris Hayes, the Why Is This Happening podcast, and I'm going clear back to October 30th of 2018,
Mhm.
and the title is White Identity Politics with Michael Tesler. And I remember listening to this episode the first time, and I listened to part of it again tonight. And in there, he talks about basically the feelings that people had. And this was based on polls and surveys and stuff done at the time, but basically starting with the election of Barack Obama in 2008, how much racial feelings started to shape your political opinions and not everybody technically, but a lot of people, and the numbers were kind of surprising both ways. But how that started to shape their, their political feelings on stuff, and the economy being one of them, right? And because
Mhm.
the whole thing kind of started with, at least from Chris Hayes' standpoint, like the question of, you know, December 2015, a lot of people would have told you the economy was terrible. Sound familiar? Would have told you
Mhm.
the economy was terrible. Trump gets elected, and in a very short amount of time, re-polling some of the same people, and oh my God, the economy is wonderful now, and tied it back to simply the feelings of a black man running the economy versus an orange man. I mean, a white man running the economy. And literally,
Mhm.
some of it was as simple as that. And so now, I couldn't help but think some today. You mentioned Kamala's race and the fact, but also the fact that she was a woman, and her, being recognized as incumbent to a large extent. And did
Mhm.
was it a huge mistake? And I don't say this as anything against Kamala. I'm just saying, with people's feelings in this country, was it a huge mistake to put a black woman's face on the current economy 3 months
Mhm.
before 3 months before the election?
Mhm.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, honestly, well, so again, this is obviously a super small sample size, but if you think about it, you've got 3 elections against Trump, 2 women lost, and a white guy won against him.
The
And
white guy
so,
won when the wounds were fresh of
yeah,
COVID.
yeah, yeah.
At the time, I think you mentioned now that Biden's approval rating is lower than Trump's ever was. But when
Hmm.
Trump was running in 20, he had the lowest approval rating of any incumbent running for office or running for
Yeah,
reelection, I believe, ever.
yeah,
Because that's what people thought of him. And somehow
yeah.
we're now going back and looking at those 4 years and saying they were rosy.
Right. Which is again why this is so surprising, just, yeah. Well, and then another thing I think, this was something that the Bulwark brought up today, I believe, was just that I think in terms of the more, I don't know, more dark kind of fatalistic take on things is that just there's just a lot of people out there that want someone like Trump, that want a demagogic asshole, um, with charisma. They want this type of person to run the country, and it doesn't make any sense to someone like you or me, really, because that's the farthest thing from what we would want. But I mean, that's just part of it too. The fact that like there's really nothing, there is no line that he could cross that is going to lose his support, and so that's just. and that's why I also thought it was kind of a little a bit of a strategic miss there. Again, not to just go around and point fingers everywhere, but when the Harris campaign pulled in all the Biden campaign folks and just extreme centrist corporate Democrats. They thought, oh, we have to go after gettable Republican voters and people that are the Haley voters and maybe, never Trumpers or already kind of either just going to sit it out or vote Harris. But going after those groups and Trump in the last election in 20 won 94% of the Republican vote. This election also won 94% of the Republican vote. So all that effort turned off everyone that was looking for the change candidate, turned off everyone that was looking a little further left or progressive in the base. And I think that's why a lot of people stayed home and didn't vote. The same Democrats didn't turn out for um, for Harris that did for Biden. And Trump got the exact same percentage of the Republican vote. So it's not like Biden pulled in a bunch of Republicans. Biden just happened to get a lot of people that the turnout was amazing, but no, the same numbers didn't turn out for Kamala, and they didn't pull any real significant numbers of Republicans over. So I think that was a decent miss there on the strategic side, and they literally about halfway through the campaign just decided to switch to that more centrist, pro corporate, not change candidate stuff and trying to woo Republicans, going out there on the stump with Liz Cheney all the time, having a bunch of Republicans speak at the DNC and talking about there's a seat at the table and I'm going to put a Republican on my cabinet and all that. Like, again, great sentiment, but to make that kind of the centerpiece of your campaign, um, and then basically not until the very last minute, not distancing yourself from the Biden campaign, the Biden presidency, saying that you're not really going to do anything different or you wouldn't have done anything different majorly. So I think there were definitely some strategic things that went awry for the Harris campaign there. And I don't, again, not blaming because I don't know who's in charge of making those particular decisions other than the buck stops with Kamala. So you gotta kind of maybe put some of the blame there with her. Um, but yeah, I think those things were definite misses.
Couple thoughts. So one, I wonder, did we have because when you look at what appeared to be so much enthusiasm for Kamala, and then I hear numbers 14 million lower, then
Mm-hmm.
was it part of it the fact that and people comment on this all the time. Biden campaigned from his basement, you know what I mean, in 2020, fears of COVID, and wasn't doing any rallies or anything like that. Where now Kamala was having huge rallies. It appeared often more enthusiasm than you saw on the Trump side, where you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
panned images of not full arenas, where Trump is. But I mean, it's hard to make a comparison to the Kamala or Trump rallies at this point. But if I go to Kamala rallies in 2024 versus no rallies in 2020, were we sort of misled in a way that there was so much quiet enthusiasm for Biden in 20, or dare I even say enthusiasm against Trump in 20? And this
Probably
time
more than
the
that, but
in
yeah,
this
yeah.
time the enthusiasm against Trump wasn't as high, but it appeared the enthusiasm for Kamala was higher
Mm-hmm.
because we could see it and feel it, and it was out there, unlike in 20.
Right. Right. So, what are you thinking that maybe that made some people complacent, and that's why they just didn't turn out in the same way, like they thought?
I don't know about complacent, but I think it led prognosticators and predictors to maybe feel
Mm,
differently when
yeah.
maybe they shouldn't have. I don't
So
know.
essentially, the illusion of overwhelming support.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
potentially.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I kind of forgot what my other point was. Maybe I'll think of it.
All right. Yeah, I was there was something else I was going to add to that as well. So if you think of it, chime in and just interrupt. So another thing that I was thinking is that the Democrats, they seem to have, especially I remember when we were going through that very fast process of looking at a bunch of alternatives to Biden, and then obviously Harris consolidated support pretty quickly, and those conversations died down. But then it, kind of switched to who was the best VP candidate for her, and so we got to look at some of the bench on the Democratic side, and who was maybe up and coming, and like Shapiro, and obviously Tim Walz, and Pete Buttigieg, and some other folks on the Democratic side. And when you kind of look across that spectrum, other than a handful of progressives that are already in, like the House, for example, you don't really have any kind of interesting dynamic, not even necessarily celebrities, but just sort of those really outspoken, charismatic people that could stand up and win a head-to-head fight with Trump. And I think that's part of the problem right now, is that, again, Democrats seem to have switched over to, and not all at once. This is certainly a slow change, but it feels like instead of the working class party, which they used to be, now they're kind of the educated elites, the college educated voters, um, and starting to get into the more affluent territory for the average voter on the Democratic side, and again, very pro corporate centrist type approach. So if you all you have are slick, institution loving, centrist corporate Democrats for candidates, is that really going to cut it? That's not what people are looking for right now, and I think that's something the Democrats have to look at. I don't know. I just not to say that we need to put someone up like Trump, but someone with some of those qualities that could actually compete. And I don't know that the bench that we're looking at is really like that. And again, the first person that comes to mind is AOC, in terms of progressive, populist, charismatic, well spoken, attractive, honestly. Which can't ignore that being an aspect of things. Some people, that's a thing. So all those things put together, and now with government experience under her belt and a reputation, someone like that is kind of the mold I'm thinking of. The only thing that would make her better is if she was a celebrity outside of politics.
Yeah, so we can sort through some names potentially in a minute, but I'm going to come back to, because actually you made me remember what my point was.
Oh, good.
Back to your idea of some of the campaign strategy. I don't know how you campaign, how you get through to people, and I don't know if it matters who you put forward if truth and reality doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
I'm just being honest. I don't know. I don't know what you do if the fact that Trump's a criminal, convicted criminal, uh, insurrectionist, twice impeached. If
Sexual
you do,
abuser.
yeah, if you're in such a comfortable place that you can just deny that and move forward, and like none of that matters, then I don't know what you campaign on that
Mm-hmm.
actually makes any sense. And I know that's probably really open ended as I say that, but that's the thing that I think struck me the most today as I was thinking about things is We talked about the economic numbers. If reality doesn't matter, then how do you win a campaign? I'm afraid we might be to the point where these people who are counting on Trump to better their lives, when he fails miserably, they've got to come around. I don't know, but if they're constantly, because we're going to be in a situation now where we've essentially got a state media again in Fox
Hmm.
News and its little corporate conservative siblings in Newsmax and whatever the other ones are called. We're going to essentially have a state media again that are going to constantly be bullshitting people, and when it comes to problems, finding some other cause for their problems other than leadership in the country. So even when those people experience that pain, we said it a little bit ago. Hey, you're at a point, if you got the presidency and the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court, you can't blame anybody else, but they will. And if
Hmm.
people don't open their eyes and see what's going on, then I don't know how you combat that with any campaign message or any person.
Yeah, well,
That's
think about
dark,
it.
I know.
Yeah, no, it is. That's really dark. But if you think about it, I mean, back since Reagan, so pretty much 40 years now, for 40 years, we've heard how bad government is and how it's not going to fix your problems and how it's the worst thing. And we need privatization. We need, our corporate saviors to deliver us from evil, and we need this and that. And it's definitely not the government. So don't count on the government for anything. So basically, for 40 years, the Republicans have been demonizing government. And so is it really a shock that after 4 decades of having those drums beat, that we keep picking, a guy who's done nothing to help government? It does nothing to upkeep institutions or norms or anything like that, that is perceived as the outsider and is perceived as a guy who's gonna, burn down the government and rebuild it in a better image. So is it really a surprise, honestly?
Well, I guess not. I mean, why did it take all that long? If Reagan was so popular, how come it took? You know, but I said
Well,
it
I,
when
I mean, things like that take time, though. I mean, it's like anything where you grow up, you had decades of the government actually benefiting society and building people up, and with the New Deal and the Civil Rights Act and with Lyndon Johnson signing things like that and the Voting Rights Act, and so I think the proof was there that the government could be used in a positive way and could benefit people and could right past wrongs. Um,
so Reagan was the first
yeah,
bullshitter, basically,
pretty
because he
much.
convinced
Yeah.
everybody the opposite,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Even though we saw it, even though people at the time saw it and experienced it,
Yeah. People
then
grew up with that
yeah,
being positive. Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of there you go. Here's the thing again, a little bit of more than a little bit of inflation in the '70s just
Yeah.
turns everything on its head, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carter had a really rough set of circumstances and also some, I don't know, light treason from Reagan, negotiating with Iran behind his back during a campaign. But yeah, that was a really rough situation that Carter was dealing with on multiple fronts. And so Reagan swooped in, and the rest is history. Uh, anyway, damn, man. My brain hurts.
Yeah. You mentioned AOC. I think she's an intriguing person, but I mean the only problem, honestly, and I not my problem, but the problem is she's already been in the crosshairs of Fox News and everybody for a number of years now. So by the time you'd run her 4 years from now, and their strategists will pick up on who's gaining momentum. By the time you run her 4 years from now, she'll be so poisoned in the mind of so many people,
Mm-hmm.
probably mostly wrongly, but
Yeah,
people will
yeah.
have their opinions, and you know, I don't know.
That's that's a good point. Honestly, I mean, that's why maybe we need just some out of the blue celebrity who's just going to come in and, has a following already, but doesn't have the baggage of, being in the crosshairs, like you said. So, and then can be coached on policy and all that other shit. But someone that's really their heart's actually in it. Like I know I was listening to a little bit of Kyle Kulinski's show, Secular Talk, the other day, or actually it was earlier today, and he was begging Jon Stewart to run in 4 years, and I
I'll,
was like,
I'll,
hell
does
yeah,
early
man, I
voting
would
start now?
support
I'll
that.
vote now.
Yeah, I'll sign up for that. So I thought that was an awesome idea. Um, but something like that, someone like that. But I agree. I think you make a good point that AOC has already been demonized heavily because they see her as a threat. Because she is progressive, she is effective at her job, she's a good communicator, she's got the whole package. So I think that's why they have spent so much time taking shots at her.
Yeah, it's too bad. I really wonder sometimes how much people actually listen. Do they listen to what's being said or being discussed, or they just listen to their favorite media outlets' coverage of what's being discussed or what's being said? And
Probably the soundbite and the
I,
talking heads.
I'll admit to being a bit guilty of that sometimes.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, I think it was I was on the board today. Tim Miller was saying, you go back to Trump's interview on Rogan, or his conversation on Rogan, I should say, and it's like, a couple hot takes got put out there and talked about and stuff, but really that probably humanized Trump in a lot of people's eyes. Like Miller said, oh, this guy's
Mm-hmm.
not Hitler, this guy's not. So those kind of things matter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on that note, the left fell under a lot of criticism for its rhetoric about Trump and how it and that rhetoric led to allegedly led to him almost getting killed a couple times. And
Mm-hmm.
um none of Trump's rhetoric ever fed into any of that, made people feel anything that maybe made them decide they would like to shoot him. um so I just want to say this: if the left was wrong about all the things they said about Trump, that he's not Hitler, that he's not a fascist, that he's not everything they said, now's your chance to prove it. Come into office and don't be a fascist and don't be a Hitler and don't be a dictator, even on day one. Now's your chance to come in and prove that the left was wrong about everything they said. Here's your chance. You're either going to prove them wrong or you're going to prove them right. Which way are
Yeah.
you going to Which way are you going to go?
Yeah. That's that's true, man. Um, so I don't know. I mean, I think we should wrap it up here. But one thing that I'd like to say, my last thought on it anyway, would be where I would like to see the Democrats go from here. And I think that's embracing the roots, the original roots of the party, or at least what made them successful in the 20th century, which was like the working class, the populist message, try to channel FDR. Um, I think there's huge power in that. I think the labor unions have swiped some pretty decent momentum. Obviously, not enough to change the outcome of this election, but have seen some good gains over the past few years. And I think that it's more and more in the consciousness of the people that I think the average person in the United States is rooting for labor to do well, is proud of our working class, and would stand behind like giving them more power and more of a voice. And then also on top of that, the populism of going at, supporting policies that instead of worrying about what your fucking donors think, like go support the policies that 70, 80, 90% of the country supports, like paid family leave and even modest gun reforms, and making the election day a national holiday, and like just some of the things that would actually, to your point from the last show, or one of our recent shows, where you're talking about what's going to benefit the most people, what's going to benefit the average person, instead of thinking about what's going to benefit the billionaire class. And so I think if they could just do those two things, which are big things, admittedly, but if they can do those two things, I think that would be a good direction for the party.
I think that's
Progressive populism.
yeah. I think that's actually in the one that we recorded that we haven't put out yet.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
probably true.
I
Yeah,
think we actually referenced that future episode quite a bit in this
yeah.
in this discussion. So
Well,
sorry,
now you
folks.
know what you have to look forward to
Yeah,
on
you'll
the
catch
next
it
couple
next week.
Saturdays.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, but I think you're right. But I still think of how much I think Kamala did. Her message was about that, and because I was thinking about
To
this.
start with, though, to start with specific, I don't want to. I'm
No,
sorry to
that's okay.
interrupt, but
That's all right.
I think she did that for like the first third of the campaign, and then it markedly shifted. So I do acknowledge that. Yeah, she definitely came out as like change candidate. Like
Well,
get rid of price gouging, help out with housing. Like that was part of her policy platform, but I think her message shifted more towards pulling in Republicans and being more pro corporate Democrat towards the middle of the campaign, in my
well,
opinion.
well. So I hear you, but I think because part of what they talked about in the board today too was kind of the meeting people where they're at. Listening to what they say, listening to the concerns of that group that does seem to want to go for does want to go for Trump. So in that regard, you could argue, well, she's hearing those people and trying to reach them. Um, we may not 100% agree with what those issues are, but I think if you're going to be president for all people, you have to hear everybody. You have to listen to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I really thought when she picked up, the UAW endorsement, and this is, I still go back to like, I'm a little stuck right now on what the future holds and what they should do when you're contending with, uh, the fact that reality and truth doesn't matter. I mean, you had Tim
Mm-hmm.
Walz. That guy was as middle America as anybody I think that's been on that thing,
Super authentic.
on a
Yeah.
card in a while. You had
Yeah.
her, middle class background against a born millionaire and a guy who left his hillbilly roots behind a long time ago. If I don't know how you get through to people who only want to hear. I don't even know if it's they only want to hear one message. They only want to hear it from certain people. We're at a point where people aren't even listening to the other side, and that goes both ways to a large
Mm-hmm.
extent. I mean, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of good things said. Even when she was pivoting a bit towards the end, it was still basically a middle class message for the most part. I mean, there were some
Mm-hmm.
things, but it was still basically a middle class message. And all those middle people went for the billionaire instead,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
not going to do anything for them. Guys, just I guess that's my party message here. Please, all you people that voted for Trump, you got what you wanted, and it's democracy. You got what you wanted. Hold the man accountable, okay? Hold the man
Mm-hmm.
accountable to the things he has promised that he's going to do, and in some of the things I don't want him to do. But let me give you an example. Word I'm hearing is he did really well with the Latino vote. Okay, that was one of the things, and Bulwark was talking about that too. The non college educated Latinos are acting very much like the non college educated whites,
Mm-hmm.
and going that way. Okay, well, one of the things he's been promising is mass deportation. Okay. And for him to do deportation, he's going to go into households where there may be, and yeah, their excuse is, oh, we're only going to go after illegal immigrants. Well, guess what? You're going to go into a lot of those households where there's some legals, there's some illegals, there's some citizens, there's some non citizens. And that's going to be a massive disruption to that whole segment of society.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you still want him to do that now that he gained a lot of Latino votes? Do you want him to go attack a large portion of his voter base or not? But that's part of what you voted for him for, was for him to do, I'm assuming the large portion to voted for him to go perform these mass deportations because illegal immigration is such a problem. So if he does that, he potentially harms a huge portion of the folks that voted for him. Is that still something you want him to do? Are you going to hold him to accountability if he does that or does not do that? I mean, honestly, I kind of hope he doesn't, just for the humanity sake of it. But like, he's
Right.
not going to end up doing half what you voted for him for at the end of the day. So if you're not getting what you want, I hope you hold that accountable. Don't just give him a. Are you just going to give him a pass? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I hope I'm making some sense here, but he's not going to do 3/4 of what you voted for him to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because so, are you going to be happy at the end of the day, or are you not going to be happy at the end of the day? Just
Yeah.
think about what you actually want, and go into the next election like a little more open eyed about what you're voting for, what you're getting.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense. I feel like it did,
Yeah.
but
Well, I was following it, so we'll
all
see
right.
if
Like, it's just,
we'll see what everyone
yeah.
thinks.
Real quick, one more thing. He talks about, oh, he's going to put RFK in charge of health.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, RFK is railing against pesticides and everything. Now, hey, listen, I'll tell you, cutting down on pesticides use in this country would probably be a really good thing for people's health.
Right.
But we talked in another episode. What are pesticides primarily? What's one of the main things that goes into a lot of pesticide and fertilizer creation?
Petroleum.
Petroleum. You think that his donors in the petroleum industry, who he already tried to, get $1 billion out of, or whatever, you know, when he promised them no regulations, you think they're going to go, oh, hey, we're super happy you put RFK in charge of health so he can come combat pesticides? That's going to go away like that, because they're going to step in and go, no, 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 or it's going to be a total like bullshit thing where uh, RFK will be in there. He's going to tell you he's doing something about it, but he's not doing anything about it and it's all a lie, because on the back end, the petroleum industry doesn't want their big cash cow cut into. So there again, there's something else
Right.
that's not gonna happen. So I'm just
Yeah.
asking all you people out there that voted, like, just pay attention to what, if you're actually getting the things you wanted out of this election at the end of the day. Over the next
Yeah.
4 years, are you actually getting what you wanted? Is he actually going to do anything that he said he was going to do? And are you going to hold him to account for it?
Right.
Now, I fully acknowledge that could backfire on me. They could put someone 10 times worse in 4 years from now. So, I don't know. But this is why we're going to talk about some other things for the
Yeah,
next,
we're gonna
because my
we're gonna
brain is
close it up
breaking.
here. Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. Yeah, I think we're gonna wrap up this one, and then, like I said, we're gonna probably find some other topics to talk about. We still have three other legs of the chair: philosophy, arts, and science that we can delve into in
Maybe
any
we'll make
given
it a
week.
bench. We'll add
So
a few more legs to
yeah, there
it.
we go. Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that was a good brain dump. Considering it was kind of a sore topic there, but I think one that we did our best to parse a little bit and get our feelings out on the table, and just kind of work through what we've been thinking. So I think we'll
It's a
leave it there.
therapy session of
Yeah.
sorts.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it for sure. I feel a little better, but also simultaneously still scratching my head. So I think that's where I'm going to be for a while, personally.
Same.
Yeah, right on. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in. If you have any thoughts, I know you can comment on platforms like Spotify and, feel free to drop a comment. And thanks for everyone who's subscribed and who downloads these shows. That it means the world to us. And we'll talk to you again soon. Take care, everybody.